I'm Rochelle Riley from the Detroit Free Press, coming to you from Jackson, Mississippi. I'm with Dr. Robert Luckett from the Department of History and the director of the Margaret Walker Center. Thank you for talking with me.
Happy to do it.
I'm here with the Monroe Trotter Group, a group of national columnists. We tweeted out a picture and had people to send us messages back saying they've never seen black folks so happy to be in Mississippi. So I don't think they've visited lately and seen what Mississippi looks like now. I've been thrilled by this campus and by what we've seen. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Mississippi and then about the Margaret Walker Center.
Okay.
I talked to you just a little bit about how young people now who think that the civil rights movement is something like the Civil War don't really have a sense of how important it is and how things are not so different. I mean, there's a lot that's different because of voting rights, but not a lot so different than what their parents and grandparents fought. How do we get through to them?
Well, particularly in Mississippi, we have an issue with making sure that our young people have an education, and I think that's probably a national story, right? We got to make sure that they have an education that provides that history for them. So many of our students don't know their history, and in Mississippi it's particularly sad because they're only a generation or maybe two generations removed directly from the civil rights movement, which is very much a living thing. Civil rights activists haven't just disappeared, they're still alive, they're around, the movement is still going on. And the same can be said for segregationists and for Southern conservatives. They didn't go anywhere either. And so this isn't ancient history, but we have to do a better job in our educational systems, particularly in our primary and secondary schools, of making sure that our students get some of this history.
Well, I spend a lot of time with young people, and when you have instances, for instance, like when former Governor Haley Barbour made his comment about how some of President Barack Obama's policies were tar babies, and, you know, for some young people, that sort of, you know, water off a duck's back, but for 2 or 3 or 4 generations of people still living, it was horrific. And I wonder if maybe there isn't some way to make sure that there's an African American Studies department at every university in America. That might help.
Yeah, and I believe in it, and I'm lucky enough to be director of one of the older black studies programs in the entire nation through the Margaret Walker Center. And the reality is, it's not just, though, having a black studies department, it's incorporating black studies into American studies and to make sure that people understand that this is American history, not just black history.
Well, I've been writing that column for 3 years now where I want to get rid of Black History Month because I think it makes people sort of limit their study and limit their interest in black history to 1 month out of the year instead of making sure that they are looking at the breadth of American history.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because to a certain extent, you need Black History Month to lift up people and have one moment where you can lift up African Americans and the importance of African American history and culture, but at the same time, it marginalizes African American history and culture to 1 month. And so, how do you escape that? Only through an educational system that incorporates all of our histories into a comprehensive program.
Absolutely. I answered that question one time by saying that you celebrate Harriet Tubman on her birthday. So, but you mentioned Margaret Walker, and this is an amazing year coming up in 2015.
Absolutely.
And I want you to talk just a little bit about the plans to celebrate her.
Well, 2015 will be Margaret Walker's centennial year. The great writer, author, activist, professor. She was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1915, raised in New Orleans, met Langston Hughes at the age of 13, became from there deeply involved in the black arts movement of the 20th century, and became both a mentee and mentor to to two opposite ends of the black arts movement spectrum of the 20th century. So she gets to be mentored by the likes of Langston Hughes and W.B. Du Bois, but then herself as an educator mentors people like Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni and Amiri Baraka and a whole James Baldwin and a whole nother generation of artists and writers in the 20th century. And she made Jackson State her home for the second half of her life. She came here in 1949 as a professor of English. She published Jubilee, her great neo-slave narrative novel, here at Jackson State it was her PhD with the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. And then she founded the Institute for the Study of the History, Life, and Culture of Black People in 1968 here on this campus in Jackson, Mississippi. A remarkable life and times and just an incredible woman. And we're going to be spending the year 2015 really lifting her into the national consciousness where we believe she so rightly belongs.
And you're going to take her story around the country, including hopefully to Detroit you're talking to.
Absolutely. We are, as part of the centennial celebration, developing what will be a permanent exhibit about Margaret and her life, using her life as a lens to look at the 20th century African American experience and look at the Black Arts Movement, but also the Civil Rights Movement. And she lived on the same street as Medgar Evers in Jackson. They were family friends. She and Murley were in garden club together, the Guine Street Garden Club. And using her life as a lens, and as from that permanent exhibit, we're developing a traveling exhibit that will travel nationally, talking about her story and her experiences in the 20th century. A remarkable woman who had to deal not just with the racist dictates of the South and of Jim Crow Mississippi, but also a sexist society. And what she accomplished in a life over the course of the 20th century is really remarkable, and a story that I think a lot of people will feel tied to.
Well, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that you'll be able to bring that to Detroit, and I'm hoping that it'll be some month other than February so we can continue to celebrate
We'll make
all
sure
year
to do
round. This was Robert Luckett, and I'm Rochelle Riley for the Detroit Free Press. Excellent. Thank
Getting
you.
hot in here.